Today I am going to talk on the issue of Dalits in India. Whenever a student of social science goes to study the Indian society, the very first question that comes to his mind is the term Dalit. Because a significant number of Indian people, of Indian population, belongs to this community. But before proceeding further, we have to look into the question, who are the Dalits in India? Now, if we look into the definition of Dalits, the word Dalit is derived from a Sanskrit word that means dal, and which in English translates into ground, suppressed, crushed or broken into the pieces. So it is very clear to us that the term Dalit, it is actually meant to represent the people of Indian society who have faced exploitation, oppression, and who have been grounded under the pressure of other castes from the time immemorial for the long time. So basically the crushed people, basically the people who are exploited, those people are basically known as Dalits. But the name Dalit is not an universal one in India, because the people of this community, they are known in different names in different parts of our country. For example, in some parts of India, the Dalits are known as Holaya, while in some parts of India, they are known as Panchama, Chandals, Samagara, Chamars, Adi Karnataka or Adi Dravid, and etc. many other names. This terminology or Dalits for all these types of people, all these kinds of people, this terminology was first used by Jyotiba Phule, the founder of Sotto Shodhok Samaj, a non-Brahmin movement in Maharashtra. He used the term to refer to the outcasts and untouchables as the victims of caste-based social division of Indian society in the 19th century. But this definition and all those things do not give us a clear idea of the people who are depressed, who are outcasts, or who are the grounded people in Indian society. To go into further into the issue of Dalits, we have to search the origin of the Dalits in the Indian society. There are a number of theories that goes into the detail of origin of the Dalits in India, but the most prominent one that was given by the Manu in his Manu Samhita is the mixed caste theory. He holds that four varnas or the varnashram protha originated from the parts of Purush, that means Brahmans originated from the mouth, the Kshatriyas from his arms, the Vaishyas from the thighs, and the Shudras from his feet. And the rest of the castes came as a result of alliances among the four varnas. Now, this theory, this explains the existence of four varnas as divinely ordained and other castes outside the varnashram scheme or varna scheme as a result of unlawful sexual alliances between men and women of different varnas. Actually, the thing that Manu proposed in the Vedic age, specifically in the later Vedic age, was the purity of the religion. That means to maintain the purity of the religion, the varnashram protha has to be kept pure. That means people from one caste, that means one caste, that is Brahma, a Brahman cannot marry a Kshatriya or vice versa and other things. And so, if that happens, then the impurity of the caste takes place, then impurity arises. And thus, people born out of such kind of unlawful intercourse are known as outcasts, or so those people are referred as those impure people. Those men, they are also known as Chandals. Chandals are impure castes. They are branded untouchables, and so they had to face a number of difficulties in their lives. Also, there are a number of recent theories that goes in contrast to this theory. The number of people that belonging to the untouchable caste superseded the number of mixed castes. That what does it mean? So the many theorists, many scholars thought that many indigenous people were living in India, they were subjugated by the Aryans after their invasions, and the Aryans, they considered those people and they were deprived of all the facilities. In most cases, those defeated peoples, they were sent to the jungles, they were deprived of all kinds of facilities, all kinds of social representations, and all those things, social interactions were banned from with them. Actually, those people who were considered untouchables or chondals, they were indulged in polluting tasks like disposing dead bodies, working with leather, cleaning toilets and sewerage, and they were stripped of their dignity and denied basic human rights. They were considered untouchables, implying that anybody touching them would be polluted. Anybody coming in contact with them will be polluted. They were denied access to roads, temples, schools to avoid pollution of other castes. Separate area were earmarked for the Dalit houses, separate wells were marked for the Dalits to take water, classrooms where Dalit children sit were built separately. Everything was separate. They were treated isolately from the society. They served the teas, they served foods in separate glasses, separate pots for the Dalit. Now, the question here is from the first part is that who was the first person to use the term Dalit? When was it used? But the Dalits who accepted suppressions and oppressions for long did not accept all those sufferings in the modern India. In the pre-Indian independence period too, starting in the 15th to 16th centuries, they started protesting against all those social inequalities and exploitations. So if we want to categorize the Dalit movements in India, we are going to talk on the pre-independence movements and the post-independence movements. So, in the pre-independence movements, we are going to have the Bhakti movement, the Neo-Vedantik movement, the Sanskritization movement, and we are also going to highlight the role of Gandhiji and obviously the name whose name comes very first in the question of Dalits, that means Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The Bhakti movement that started in the 15th century. This is long ago, before the advent of even the English or the British for colonizing forces in India. The leaders of the Bhakti movement, or the motto of the Bhakti movement was that it treated all the sections of the society equally. It developed on two traditions of Shagun and Nirgun. The Shagun tradition advocated equality among all the castes, though it subscribed to the Varnashram Dharma and the caste-based social order. And the Nirgun philosophy, it believed in the formless universal God. The Nirgun philosophy, it believed that there is only one universal God and it has no forms existing. The most important leaders of this movement are Ravidas and Kabir. Next, that the movement that started in the Dalit community was the Neo-Vedantik movement in the 19th or 20th century. It was actually initiated by the Hindu religious and social reformers. The religious and social reformers of the Hindu religion, they attempted to remove untouchability by taking the Dalits into the fold of the caste system. And we must remind that it must be recalled that Dalits were so long not a part of the caste system, they were branded as outcasts or who belonged outside the caste system. And in this context, the name whose name comes very first is the Dayanand Saraswati. He was the founder of the Arya Samaj. He believed that the caste system was a political institution created by the rulers not for the common good of the society but for their own benefits, and it was not a natural and religious distinction. So simply put, Dayanand Saraswati possessed of the Dalits is that the idea of Dalits was it was a means of exploitation by some powerful persons, the powerful people, community in the society who wanted to exert, who wanted to retain their dominance over some other people in the society. So it was basically a means of exploitation and methods of retaining their dominance. The Shottoshodhak Samaj and the self-respect movement in Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, the Adi Dharma and Adi Andhra movement that in Bengal, the Adi Hindu movement in Uttar Pradesh are very important anti-untouchability movements which were launched in the last quarter of the 19th and early part of the 20th century. Now, after these trends of anti-untouchability movements in India, we found that there was another trend in the Dalit community. With this trend, what happened is that the Dalit leaders, they began to project themselves accustomed with the rituals and customs of the upper caste people, upper caste society. What was it? The Dalit leaders, they started to follow the practice of vegetarianism. They started putting sandalwood paste on their forehead to look like upper caste Brahmins. They started wearing sacred threads also. So what were those things? They were actually pretending that they alike the upper caste people, and this trend known as Sanskritization, as prominent philosopher of Indian society, M.N. Srinivas, he pointed out that this trend in Dalit society, it can be called as Sanskritization. But why is it called Sanskritization? Because Sanskrit at that time was the language of the elite people in India. The Brahmins only could read the religious scriptures, and all the religious scriptures were written in the language of Sanskrit. So one who can acquire Sanskrit could be considered as a member of that upper elite society, and that's why the lower caste, that means and even the outcast, so Dalit leaders who were able to get into the rituals, customs of those upper caste elites may be considered as a part of that upper caste society. They wanted to identify themselves as belonging to that upper caste. Before the independence years, in the 20th century, the role of Gandhiji comes into the forefront in the Dalit movement of India. Gandhiji called these people Harijans or children of gods. He stressed the problem of untouchability and its removal from its roots. He was very much vocal against the process of untouchability and condemned it to his heart's content. To boost up the work for the upliftment of Harijans, Gandhiji laid the foundation of Harijan Sevak Sangh in 1932 when he was in the jail. Now, we are coming to the role of B.R. Ambedkar, the most prominent leader of the Dalit society. Ambedkar was a member of the Dalit society, and he experienced all those atrocities and cruelties and all those suppressions, oppressions, exploitations, and the bad experiences that challenges the Dalits in their day-to-day life. So he was very much adamant to remove all those barriers of development from the Dalit society, and he was very much against the rituals, against the practice of untouchability. So he started a Maratha fortnightly journal in April 1927, and again another weekly called Janta in November 1930. He supported intercaste dinner and intercaste marriage. He also published another paper, Samata, in March 1929. In December 1927, he led a satyagraha to establish the civic rights of the untouchables to draw water from a public tank at Mahad district in Kolaba. Dr. Ambedkar was very much aware that without political representation, the Dalit community is not going to come out from their social exploitation and social inequality. So that's the reason why he started pleading for some reservation of seats in the Central Legislative Assembly for the Dalit community. And in response, in the Government of India Act 1919, it was proposed that the depressed class will get some representation in the Central Legislative Assembly, and there will be some reservations for that community. So that was the first time the term depressed class was recognized constitutionally or legally by any governmental authority, and the Dalit community got some kind of identity or some kind of recognition in some forms. It was at his insistence that Pune Pact of September 1932 provided for reservation of seats for depressed class out of general electorate seats. And this principle was also followed in the Government of India Act 1935, where there was provisions of reservation for the scheduled castes. From April 1942 to 1946, he spread his activities and formed the Scheduled Castes Federation as an all India political party. So before independence, this was all about the Dalit movement in India and Dalit consciousness in India. Now the question that comes into the mind is that who coined the term Sanskritization? After the independence of India, the new constitution was framed at, and it came into force in the year 1950. The new Constitution of India provided several new liberties and protection was guaranteed for the Dalit community, that means the scheduled castes. In our constitution, reservation of jobs in civil services, places in educational institutes for the Dalits or the scheduled castes were guaranteed. And after that, after the constitutional guarantees, constitutional rights were given, the Dalit movement in India followed in some other trajectory. Ambedkar, who was very much concerned about the rights of the Dalits in the pre-independence movements, pre-independence time, who was very much concerned about the entitlements and the political power of the Dalits, was quite satisfied with the thing that happened in the Constituent Assembly, and the Constitution of India provided considerable benefits and considerable protections to the Dalit community. In the 1950s, Ambedkar tilted fully towards Buddhism. He believed that caste system is the foundation of Hindu religion, and as long as Dalits will remain Hindus, they will have to face the oppression in the society. So he converted himself into Buddhism. Following him, around 4 lakh Dalits also converted into Buddhism. The next wave of Dalit movement that happened in India is the Dalit Panthers movement. Dalit Panthers is a social organization founded by Namdev Dhasal in April 1972 in Mumbai. It was inspired by Black Panther Party, a revolutionary movement amongst African Americans which emerged in the United States and functioned from 1966 to 1982. They called themselves Panthers because they were supposed to fight for their rights like panthers and not to get suppressed by the strength and might of their oppressors. The members who came to this movement were basically young men belonging to the Neo-Buddhists and scheduled castes. They were full of excitement and they were not going to be tamed by any kind of suppression and oppression by the upper caste people. This movement is different from the several other movements in the earlier stages of Indian society because this movement is a radical departure from earlier Dalit movements, as its initial thrust on militancy through the use of rustic arms and threats gave the movement a revolutionary color. But ultimately the Panthers movement also did not succeed, and it was also suppressed by the governmental authority. Now, in the 1970s, after this Dalit Panthers movement, there was a vacuum in the Dalit movement space of India. In this space appeared the name of Kanshi Ram, a man who had his service in the DRDO of India. In 1971, Kanshi Ram quit his job in DRDO and together with his colleagues established the SCs, STs and OBCs Minority Employees Welfare Association. This association dealt with the exploitations and the suppressions faced by Dalits and minority employees in their workplace. In 1973, Kanshi Ram again with his colleagues established the BAMSEF. The full form was Backward and Minority Communities Employees Federation. In 1980, he created a roadshow named Ambedkar Mela, which showed the life of Ambedkar and his views through pictures and narrations. In 1981, he founded the Dalit Shashid Samaj Sangharsh Samiti to fight against the attacks on the workers who were spreading awareness on the caste system. But those associations were not enough to challenge the upper caste supremacy or dominance in the Indian society. So Kanshi Ram, he actually realized that what he needed was a political power, and that's why finally in 1984 he established a full-fledged political party known as the Bahujan Samaj Party. This party is going to have miraculous electoral results in the upcoming years, holding the hands of the Kanshi Ram's disciple Mayawati. So we are now going to see the role of Mayawati in the Dalit movements in India. Mayawati, and she is a very able leader, and she became the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh for 4 separate terms. And it was at her insistence and under her leadership that Bahujan Samaj Party gained popularity and electoral fortune in Uttar Pradesh for a considerable number of years. Mayawati, during her tenure, directed all the commissioners and district magistrates to distribute 3-acre land pieces or pattas to weaker sections of the society by launching a special drive for illegal possession of pattas be dispossessed of them. In 2010, around 6,000 people belonging to the SC and ST communities were allotted hectares and hectares of agricultural land. In a special drive, 74 FIRs were filed and 88 people were arrested for illegal occupation of agricultural land. Along with these things, she also launched a number of governmental programs which talked of Dalits rights, which gave some empowerment benefits to the Dalits and all those things. She has given a sense of self-confidence to the community that even Ambedkar or Kanshi Ram could never give. She actually showed how empowerment can be and how the political empowerment or political rights can change the fortunes of a community in the Indian society. But in the recent years, we can see that the Dalit movement started by Mayawati or her political party, that is Bahujan Samaj Party, is on a decline. If we look at the current situation of caste system in India, we can discern a certain number of features. The first feature that we can see is that it is a full circle movement from annihilation of caste to secularization of caste in Indian society. Actually, it was expected that with the advent of modernity and democratization, caste distinction will wither away, but the reverse has happened. The caste distinction has not withered away from the Indian society. Globalization, economic development, and along with the constitutional protections and reservations have affected the lives of the Dalit community in a large number of ways. They have understood that gaining acceptance is more tangible than abstract utopian ideas of annihilating caste. They understood that annihilation is not possible, or rather it's an utopian dream that cannot be materialized in the Indian society. So rather it is better for them to gain acceptance within the setup or within the traditional framework of Indian society. Aspiration, not identity, is the basis of this kind of change in the Dalit movement in India. The Dalits now aspire to get into higher political positions. They aspire to have better government services. They aspire to have places in higher educational institutions. All these are Dalit aspirations, and they are very much aware of their identity, and they now want to utilize their identity and get into the positions of power in the Indian societies. Also, another trend that is discernible is the decline of Dalit parties. Bahujan Samaj Party, we have already discussed that Mayawati served 4 terms as Chief Ministers of Uttar Pradesh, that Bahujan Samaj Party managed to win only 10 seats in the 2019 Lok Sabha elections and only 1 seat in the 2022 UP Vidhan Sabha elections out of 403 seats. In the new millennium, we can see the revival of BJP under the new leadership and promise of economic development. With these promises of economic development and leadership, a number of people belonging to the Dalit community is drifting away from their traditional Dalit political parties, and they are going to the fold of BJP. They are going into the vote bank of BJP. They are actually the message of cultural inclusion that the new BJP leadership is now going to have a success in the electoral terms within the Dalit community. But whatever happens in the Dalit community in terms of elections and all political empowerments, there are certain matters that are very much concerning today from the point of view of Dalits. Nearly 1,39,045 cases of crime against Dalits have been registered in different states between 2018 and 2020. Rohit Vemula's death in 2016 sparked protest across India and gained widespread attention as a case of discrimination against the Dalits in Indian universities. The cases of Hathras, Lakhimpur Kheri, where the Dalit women were raped and murdered, also gained significant attention in the Indian media. Also, if we look at the unemployment rate among the Dalits, it is 8.3% in 2019, that is higher than the national average of 6.7%. Literacy rate of Dalit is also 66%, that is lower than the national average of 73%. According to NFH's report 2018 that mentions that Dalit women get lesser facilities in comparison to upper caste women. Life expectancy of Dalit women is also 40 years in comparison to 55 of the upper caste women. So, there are a number of things that must be pointed out from these observations, is that though the Dalits have attained some political representations, political empowerment, the thing that the social exploitations and the social origins of exploitation, those things have not diminished from the Indian society. The people are not at all aware of the modernity, of the modernization trends, and those social stratifications are on full swing as these examples of crimes against Dalits have been on a rise, and they are very much frequent in the Indian society. So, we must look into the issue of social stratification and the social exploitation that is being faced by Dalits, and the violence that is faced by the Dalits in modern India, along with the issues of reservation and political empowerment of Dalits. Now, the question that comes in the last is, who founded the Bahujan Samaj Party and when was it founded? Let's conclude by saying that the Dalit saga in Indian politics or Indian society is all about exploitation and suppression of the lower castes by the upper castes. But we are very much optimistic about the conditions and futures of Dalits in India. We are very much hopeful that in the upcoming days, we all will join hands and establish a exploitation-free egalitarian society in India, and we will also experience the emancipation of Dalits, and we will also be successful in establishing equality as a principle of society in India. Thank you.